3 years ago, I left a six-figure corporate job and I became self-employed. Since then, I have generated over £500,000 in revenue for my business. And whilst I'm incredibly proud of that, the truth is that some of the biggest lessons I've learned about money have absolutely nothing to do with making more of it. If there is one thing I've realised, it's that your relationship with money comes with you. Now, I have been financially independent since I left school. I have not been bankrolled by the bank of mum and dad. After moving out with housemates, I've lived on my own for almost 10 years. And about a decade ago, I found myself in a financially abusive relationship, which showed me a very ugly side of money that wasn't about freedom or opportunity at all, but it was about control. And it was horrid. I spent years in employment where money was relatively simple. A salary arrived every month. I paid my bills, I saved for a bit, and that was about the extent of it. Then I became self-employed, and suddenly it felt like I was learning an entire new language. Profit, tax, cash flow, runway, pensions, investments, forecasting. I didn't know what a dividend was for the first year of running my business, let alone splitting that out versus a salary. And I remember sitting with my accountant last year and she asked me what my financial goals were. And I told her I had two. The first was to buy a penthouse in Clerkenwell, still the dream. And the second was to eventually understand the conversations that I was having with her. And whilst I've learned a lot in the last few years, I've also realised that earning more money and feeling secure about money are not necessarily the same thing. In fact, over the last few months, I've had some sessions with a coach specifically to better understand my own relationship with money, because some of the beliefs I thought I'd left behind were still showing up in ways that I hadn't recognised. So in this video, I want to share 5 money lessons I've learned since becoming self-employed. Some of them are practical, some may surprise you, and a couple have completely changed the way I think about success, security, and what money is actually for. Lesson 1. Every yes has a cost. Now, in my first year of self-employment, I said yes to pretty much everything. Firstly, because I had no idea how much I was about to earn. But secondly, I was kind of curious to see what people would hire me for. I would squeeze in as much as I could. Sometimes I'd bring in external contractors to help me deliver the work. But I think in the last 6 months, the opportunity cost has becoming more and more obvious. Every yes is a trade. Every time I say yes to more marketing work, I'm saying no to potentially more speaking engagements or creator partnerships. And recently I've had to make a really challenging decision. I'm actively reducing the amount of marketing work I'm saying yes to because I want to give myself the space to be able to build the business that I'm launching in September, Careering. Knowing that decision was coming and I was actively going to be reducing my marketing work has actually meant I've said yes to a lot of things and probably taken myself over capacity. I found myself working a lot on weekends and evenings. And I guess what I'm realizing is the cost of saying yes isn't just everything you're doing, it's everything you're no longer being able to do. The more that I'm spending time on marketing work, the less I'm making content. The less I'm making content, the less opportunities I have. Every time I say yes to going for a coffee with someone, that's potentially 2 or 3 hours out of my day that I could be spent on the new business. There is a balance, and I've really had to learn that recently. Lesson 2, get really comfortable asking people what they get paid. Now, I've got 3 examples of why talking about money matters. The first was I worked in a brand partnership. This was maybe 18 months ago. It's quite a while now. And as part of the partnership, I had to go to an event and then share some content about it afterwards. There was another creator there and he said to me, "What did you get paid for this? This is what I got paid." And I found it so refreshing. I was like, this is amazing. And look, he got paid a lot more than me. His profile was a lot bigger. His following was a lot bigger. And I didn't come away from it going, "Oh my God, he's earning more than me." I was like, "Oh my God, that's really interesting to see what you could potentially earn." The next example was when I was in Cannes last year at Cannes Lions. I was speaking to someone about speaker fees, and someone who is much further ahead in their career and way more experienced shared the fees that they earn every time they do a speaking gig. It's like a small salary. But what it did make me do is realize what's possible. And actually, off the back of that, it has really motivated me to get so much better at speaking. And as a result, I have been able to up my own fees. And then the final story is from a client. They had reached out to me over a year ago, asking me to draw up a proposal for a social strategy. Now, they went with an agency in the end. They said that's the best route for them. But the reason they were approaching me this time is because the work that the agency had delivered just wasn't working for them. And in that process, they shared the amount that they paid the agency, and it was so much more than I was charging. And actually I looked at the work and I was like, this is shit. It was not great. And I think I've maybe undervalued my own self. I don't have a fancy agency name or branded deck. that I, have next to my name. But what I did have was a shit ton of experience that clearly wasn't evident in this agency's work. And I think what's really interesting here is expanding your idea of what is possible when it comes to money and earning. I think transparency and benchmarking is so important. It's why I really encourage talking about money, sharing your day rate, sharing your fees. I even had a coffee with a friend recently who's also a creator, and we were discussing what we've been paid for things, and that we're in totally different categories and totally different followings. But it's just really interesting to see the variation. And if I'm brutally honest, I think the more I've talked about money, the more money I've made. Lesson 3, money gives you choices. Now look, money doesn't buy happiness, but it does give you choices and time. And I'd argue that that can alleviate a lot of stress. This is a really minor example, but recently I forgot to register my car in the gym car park and left, and a few weeks later I got fined. I paid on the same day and I moved on. And I guess the reason I'm telling you this story is because not that it wasn't fucking annoying that I'd forgotten, but I was just able to pay it and move on. And I think that choice of not having to worry about, okay, I've got to wait till payday, I've got to wait for something to come in. I just had the money in my account and I could pay it. And the kind of mental stress of not having to think about it any longer than I needed to was really helpful. A huge choice I've made in the last year is start working with a personal trainer. I absolutely love it. Now, I will be quite transparent. It's my largest expense after my mortgage. But what I'm paying for here is accountability. And actually what I'm also buying is energy. It gives a really great start to my day. I feel more productive. And with that energy breeds more opportunities. And finally, building, careering my new business. I have really had to balance my marketing work with building a new business. One thing that has been helpful is steadily increasing my rates. I've got more experience. I've got more of an understanding of my value. And I've really been holding my nerve on fees. In fact, recently I took on some work with a client and they approached me. We had an amazing conversation. They said they specifically wanted to work with me. I gave my fees. They tried to negotiate and I said, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to leave it there. They came back and they paid my full fee. And actually I was speaking to the client when I started the work, and one of the comments made was, I just love the fact that you held your nerve and you were like, no, I know my value. So I'm quite proud of myself for that. And what that has done for me is enabled me to create a longer runway in the business so that as I start to reduce my marketing work and start to spend more time on careering, there may be a gap where actually, I'm earning a bit less, but I've got a buffer and that buys me time to kind of cover costs in the interim. I guess in summary, it's less about what money buys and more about maybe the decisions it allows you to make. Money gives you choices and time and flexibility. Lesson 4, security isn't where I thought it was. Now, previously, security in employment has meant a salary, a pension, a really clear career ladder. Actually, side note on pension, I really never paid attention to my pension in corporate life, and I really wish I had, because when I went self-employed, I consolidated all of my pensions from different employers and I realised how fucking little I have. So now with the work of a financial advisor, I generously put into as much as I can into my pension each month. Anyway, back to the point. Then I went into self-employment and wow, I did not feel stable or secure in the absolute slightest. But I really noticed a switch. I realised I was relying on one income and one income only. And that's great. But as soon as that's ripped away, it can feel quite scary. And now I have a portfolio career and I earn money in a variety of different ways. I have different income streams. And if one goes a bit quiet, then generally it means I'm bringing in money elsewhere. And I've managed to build up a really great runway. I am obsessed with my financial pipeline that I keep on Trello. I look at what's coming in, what conversations I'm having, and it just gives me peace of mind to know not only have I got a certain amount booked for the rest of the year, but I'm having all of these conversations instead. Being in employment isn't guaranteed security. And being in self-employment isn't automatically risky either. I think security can be created. Security isn't a job type in the slightest, it's a capability. And I really used to think security came from having one employer. Now I think it comes from knowing I could recover if I lost a client. Now this final lesson is probably the one that surprised me the most, because if you'd asked me 10 years ago what money was for, I would have given you a very different answer. So lesson 5, it's okay to want more. For a long time, I think I had a slightly complicated relationship with money, partly because of experiences I'd had, partly because I spent years in employment where money largely arrived in the same way every month, and I didn't have to think too much about how it was created. And partly because I think there's still a discomfort, particularly for women, in openly saying, I want to earn more. But I am becoming more comfortable with saying that. Wanting more money doesn't automatically make you more greedy. It depends why you want it. I've seen some pretty ugly sides of money. I've seen how it can be used to control people. I've seen how it can distort relationships. But I've also seen the opportunities it can create, the flexibility and the freedom, the ability to invest in yourself, to help people you care about, to buy more time. Some of the things I've experienced over the last few years have made me realise that money is out there. And I'll give you an example of this. The first time I went to Cannes Lions last year, there was a gross amount of money being spent. And look, it was very, it was quite vulgar at times, but I just remember thinking, oh my God, there's so much money in the industry and I want a part of it. And realizing that money's out there, whether it's hearing what other people charge, seeing businesses get funded, walking around Cannes Lions and seeing the kind of scale of budgets being spent, or simply spending time around people who have built significant wealth for themselves. I think it stopped feeling like something that has happened to other people and has started to feel like something I've wanted to understand. I don't want wealth for the sake of wealth. I want the options that come with it. I want to build something meaningful and to create value and to be rewarded fairly for that value. I don't think those things are contradictory. In fact, I think they're deeply connected. The biggest shift for me isn't that I care less about money, it's I've become clearer about why I want it. And perhaps this is why I've made this video, to reflect on how I've been developing a more conscious relationship with money and deciding what role I want it to play in my life. So, those are 5 of the biggest money lessons I've learned since becoming self-employed. I didn't nearly make this video because when you look online, it can sometimes feel like everyone talking about money has absolutely cracked it. Everyone seems wildly confident. They have a framework or a blueprint, some 7-step process for success. And that's not really how it feels for me. There are days where I feel confident and ambitious and excited about what's possible. And there are days where I look at my bank account or my pipeline or my pension or my tax bill and go, oh my God, what on earth am I doing? I compare myself to others and that's grim. I don't think I've got the perfect relationship with money. I think I'm still building one. But what I do know is that over the last few years, I've become much more interested in understanding it, talking about it, learning about it, and being honest about the bits I still find difficult. Money affects so many of our decisions, the jobs we take, the risks we don't take, the relationships we stay in, and the opportunities we pursue. And yet it's something so many of us barely talk about honestly. So maybe that's the lesson, not that I've figured money out, it's just that I've stopped pretending I should have. And that curiosity probably has taught me more than confidence ever could. That's it for this week. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And until next time, keep careering.